What makes a woman wake up one morning, sip her coffee on a luxury Miami balcony, and watch her husband of 8 days plummet 20 stories to his death? The more chilling question: what makes her order room service right after? On January 15th, 2023, the security cameras at St. Regis Bal Harbour Resort captured Patricia Mitchell Anderson's morning routine. 5:43 a.m., she orders her usual black coffee. 5:40 a.m., her husband Robert falls from their balcony. 6:05 a.m., she calmly orders Eggs Benedict. To this day, no one knows if she watched him fall. The most terrifying part: this wasn't Patricia's first honeymoon. This is the story of Sweet 2010, where I do became I did, where a respected Boston real estate mogul transformed from grieving widow to Miami's most enigmatic suspect. The question isn't whether Patricia Mitchell Anderson is a black widow, it's how many times she's done this before. You see, Detective Maria Ramirez didn't just uncover a murder that morning. She uncovered a pattern: 3 cities, 3 marriages, 3 accidents. But this time, something was different. This time, Patricia made a mistake. Some say the most dangerous predator is the one you invite into your bed. Others say it's the one who makes you feel safest. Patricia Mitchell Anderson might just be both. This story isn't just about how Robert Anderson died. It's about the 6 months that led to his last breath, and the 20 years of breadcrumbs that finally led to his killer. What you're about to hear isn't just a murder mystery. It's a masterclass in manipulation, where every "I love you" was one step closer to the edge of a balcony. The question isn't who killed Robert Anderson. The question is how many others weren't as lucky as him. At least with Robert, we found a body. If you're enjoying our content, quickly hit subscribe to join our community and never miss a moment. Let's dive in. Patricia Mitchell Anderson moved through Boston's elite social circles like a ghost. There, but somehow never leaving footprints. At 55, she carried herself with the kind of confidence that only old money could buy. Her Chanel suits and perfectly styled silver hair were her armor, her disarming smile, her weapon. In the world of luxury real estate, she was a shark in silk clothing, turning million-dollar deals into multi-million-dollar empires. Her clients included CEOs, tech moguls, and occasionally people who needed to disappear quietly into new identities and new homes. Every Sunday, she hosted charity galas at her Beacon Hill mansion. The wives whispered about how she'd bought it in cash. The husbands whispered about how no one knew where that cash came from. But in Boston's high society, money talked louder than rumors, and Patricia's money screamed. Robert Anderson was her opposite in every way. A 58-year-old financial advisor who built his reputation penny by penny, client by client. His daughter Jenny called him the most honest man in a dishonest business. His office still used paper files. He still wrote thank you notes by hand. His wife of 30 years, Sarah, had died of cancer in 2021, and grief had carved permanent shadows under his eyes. They met at the Symphony Hall fundraiser. Patricia wore red. She always wore red to first meetings. Robert was there because his firm insisted on maintaining client relationships. He wasn't looking for love. She wasn't looking for love either. Their courtship blazed through Boston's winter like a fever. Jenny watched her father transform from a grieving widower into a lovesick teenager. His colleagues noticed the designer suits replacing his old Brooks Brothers collection. His best friend Mark Thompson, a fellow financial advisor, noticed the steady changes in Robert, subtle at first, then increasingly concerning. Patricia's past was a beautifully crafted mosaic of prestige and mystery. Born in Old Money, Philadelphia, boarding school in Switzerland, a first marriage that ended in tragedy, poor James, heart attack on their yacht, a second marriage so brief she hardly counted it. Each piece of her history shimmered like a mirage, beautiful from a distance, but somehow impossible to grasp up close. Every question about Patricia's past led to more questions. Every answer she gave opened new doors, each one leading to more elaborate stories, more exotic locations, more fascinating details. She was a master of deflection, turning every query about herself into an enthralling story that left the listener forgetting what they'd asked in the first place. On their wedding day in December 2022, the small private ceremony at Boston's St. Dominic's Chapel seemed like a fairy tale ending. Only 30 guests. Patricia had insisted on intimate. Only one photographer. Patricia had insisted on privacy. only one video, Patricia had insisted on simplicity. Jenny Anderson stood in her bridesmaid's dress watching her new stepmother exchange vows with her father. She didn't clap during the kisses. She didn't smile during the toasts. Instead, she watched Patricia's hands, the way they moved over her father's arm, his back, his drink, like a spider weaving a web, like someone conducting an orchestra only she could hear. 2 weeks later, Patricia would choose Miami's St. Regis for their honeymoon. The height of luxury, she called it. 20 stories of sheer glass overlooking the pristine beaches of Bal Harbour, a place where the champagne never stopped flowing, where every sunset painted the ocean gold, and where the height of luxury could turn into the depths of mystery. What no one knew was that Jenny Anderson had started pulling at loose threads in Patricia's perfectly woven tapestry, one thread at a time, slowly, carefully, because Jenny had learned something from watching her new stepmother. Sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones who appear the most perfect. The St. Regis Bal Harbour stood like a glittering sword against Miami's January sky. For most guests, Suite 2010 was just another luxury honeymoon retreat. But from the moment Patricia and Robert Anderson arrived, something about them caught the staff's attention. It wasn't just Patricia's impeccable Hermes luggage or Robert's nervous enthusiasm. It was the way she watched him, constant, calculating, like someone studying a chessboard. Their first 3 days played out like a perfect romantic movie. Breakfast on their private balcony, couples massages at the Remed Spa, sunset dinners at exclusive restaurants. Patricia charmed every waiter, remembered every staff member's name, left generous tips. Robert followed in her wake, basking in what he thought was the start of their perfect life together. But there were moments, small cracks in the perfect facade. The way Patricia insisted on handling all their drinks herself, a habit she called romantic. Her lengthy private phone calls on the balcony, always conducted in whispers. The room service staff noticed she ordered her coffee black each morning at precisely 5:43 a.m., always stepping onto the balcony to drink it alone. On their fourth night, other guests heard them arguing. The words weren't clear, but Robert's voice carried down the hallway, something about phone calls, about numbers that didn't add up. Patricia's response was too quiet to hear, but 30 minutes later they were seen at the hotel bar, her hand on his arm, his face apologetic. She ordered his favorite scotch. He didn't notice she wasn't drinking hers. Their fifth day brought a storm, unusual for Miami in January. The winds howled around the building's glass exterior, and the waves crashed against the beach below. Patricia spent hours on the balcony, watching the water. Robert made calls to his office back in Boston, his voice tense. Something about urgent paperwork, about signatures that needed verification. The sixth day dawned clear and perfect. Patricia arranged a surprise for Robert, a private yacht tour for the following morning. To watch the sunrise, she told him at dinner, the perfect view of paradise. She insisted on toasting with champagne, multiple times. The restaurant staff later noted how she kept his glass especially full. On their seventh night, security cameras caught Patricia pacing the hallway at 2 a.m., phone pressed to her ear. In the footage, she's perfectly put together even at that hour. Cream silk pajamas, not a hair out of place. The only sign of tension was in her hands, continuously twisting her new wedding ring. Their final night together, Robert called his daughter Jenny. The call lasted 3 minutes. His last words to her, "Something's not right, sweetheart. I need to tell you about what I found." The call ended abruptly. Hotel records show Patricia ordered a bottle of champagne to their room 5 minutes later. The next morning would bring that fateful coffee order at 5:43 a.m. But in these last few hours of darkness, Suite 2010 held its secrets close. The only witnesses to what truly happened behind those doors were the moon, the waves, and the ever-present cameras, silently recording every move in the hallways below. January 15th, 2023 began like a postcard from paradise, the kind of Miami morning tourists dream about. Air crisp and salty, sky turning from velvet black to watercolor pink. In Suite 2010, the dawn was about to paint a very different picture. 5:30 a.m., the night security guard changed shifts with an odd note in his log. Strange sounds from 2010, like furniture moving. The night manager considered checking, but didn't want to disturb the honeymooners. It wasn't unusual for guests to rearrange things to watch the sunrise. 5:43 a.m. Patricia's coffee order arrived right on schedule. The room service waiter noticed two things. The suite was unusually cold, the balcony door had been left open all night, and Robert's briefcase lay open on the floor, papers scattered everywhere. Patricia signed the check with a steady hand, adding her usual generous tip. 5:45 a.m. Security cameras caught a brief glimpse through the closing door. Patricia walking toward the balcony, coffee in hand. The suite's interior looked different. The heavy armchair, usually by the window, was now against the far wall. The glass coffee table had been moved closer to the balcony door. A guest in Suite 2008 heard what they described as an intense conversation. A man's voice, then silence. The walls of the St. Regis were thick. For any sound to carry through them, someone had to be speaking very loudly indeed. The cameras in the beachfront security office recorded something falling past their view. The guard on duty was changing the coffee filter. By the time he looked up, there was only the aftermath. The first screams from the beach. A morning jogger found Robert Anderson's body on the sand. He was still wearing his navy silk pajamas, Patricia's Christmas gift to him. In his pocket, a crumpled piece of paper would later prove to be more than just a discarded note. 6:05 a.m. As chaos erupted below, Patricia's voice came through on the room service line again. "Eggs Benedict, please, and more coffee." The same order she'd placed every morning of their honeymoon. When the waiter arrived, she was sitting on the balcony watching the growing crowd below. She hadn't changed out of her cream silk pajamas, but she had taken the time to apply fresh lipstick. The morning sun caught the wedding ring on her finger as she lifted her coffee cup. 8 days ago, that ring had been a symbol of love. Now it caught the light like a warning sign no one had heeded. Below, the tide was coming in, washing away whatever secrets the sand might have held. Detective Maria Ramirez arrived at St. Regis as Miami's morning traffic began to swell. Her first impression wasn't of the body on the beach, but of the woman in Suite 2010. Patricia Mitchell Anderson sat perched on a $5,000 armchair, one leg crossed elegantly over the other, looking more like she was about to host a charity luncheon than be questioned about her husband's death. It was horrible. Patricia's voice trembled perfectly. Robert had been sleepwalking since his first wife died. I warned him about the balcony. A single tear rolled down her cheek, somehow not disturbing her immaculate makeup. She dabbed it away with a monogrammed handkerchief. But the suite told a different story. The scattered financial documents, the laptop still open to offshore banking records, the missing papers that had been in Robert's hands. Most telling was the balcony furniture, all pushed against the walls, thus creating a clear path to the railing. Within hours, the hotel's security footage painted an even more troubling picture. The night manager reported overhearing Robert's last phone call to his daughter. A bartender remembered Patricia asking detailed questions about the hotel's security camera locations days earlier, playing it off as concerns about paparazzi. A maid mentioned finding shredded papers in the wastebasket that morning. As crime scene technicians processed Suite 2010, they discovered something odd about Patricia's perfect grieving widow performance. Her suitcase was already packed. A one-way ticket to the Cayman Islands sat in her designer handbag, dated for that afternoon. Most curious was a folder hidden in the room's safe containing documents about Robert's recently updated life insurance policy, all $10 million of it. But Patricia had an answer for everything. The packed suitcase? We were moving to the beach villa today. The plane ticket? A surprise for Robert, he loved diving. The insurance papers? Just being prepared. At our age, you have to be. Yet as Miami's forensics team worked methodically through the scene, more questions emerged. Why were there 2 coffee cups on the balcony when Robert supposedly fell during his sleepwalk? Why had Patricia called her lawyer before calling 911? And what explained the strange bruising pattern on Robert's wrists? Jenny Anderson arrived in Miami on the evening flight from Boston, her father's last words still echoing in her mind. In her carry-on bag, she carried something that would change everything, a private investigator's file 6 months in the making. But she wasn't the only one who'd been digging. While Patricia held court in the St. Regis lobby, surrounded by sympathetic hotel guests, Miami PD's forensics team made a discovery in Suite 2010. Hidden beneath the suite's elegant writing desk, they found Robert's cell phone. The last photo taken, a series of banking documents showing wire transfers from his accounts to an unknown offshore number. Timestamp 2:12 a.m. Back in Boston, Robert's office was telling its own story. His assistant found his computer had been accessed remotely at 4 a.m., hours before his death. Files deleted, emails erased, but Robert, ever meticulous, had left a trail. Every Friday for the past month, he'd mailed himself a small envelope at his daughter's address. The last one had arrived that morning. Meanwhile, at Miami-Dade Police Department, analysts were puzzling over Patricia's perfect alibi. Security footage showed her on the balcony at the time of Robert's fall, but something about the camera angle seemed odd. The timestamp flickered, almost imperceptibly. Almost. Patricia's own history was starting to unravel. The prestigious Philadelphia address she claimed as her childhood home, it didn't exist until 1990. The Swiss boarding school? No record of a Patricia Mitchell. Her first husband James's tragic yacht accident? No maritime death records matched her story. But most intriguing was what the hotel staff began to remember. The way Patricia had toured the building extensively during their first days, asking detailed questions about security protocols. How she'd specifically requested Suite 2010 weeks in advance, insisting on that exact room. The peculiar way she'd timed her morning coffee orders down to the minute. And then there was the USB drive clutched in Robert's hand. The same hand that had 3 broken fingers, broken before the fall. Inside that drive was a single video file, its contents still encrypted. The file name, patriciatruth.mp4. The encrypted video file broke open Miami's most haunting case. In Robert's final recording, made just hours before his death, his face filled the frame, exhausted but determined. If you're watching this, I've found something I wasn't supposed to. Patricia isn't who she says she is. I've traced the money. God help me, I've found the others. Detective Ramirez's team worked through the night, cross-referencing Patricia's past. The pattern emerged like a spider's web. Cleveland, 2015, Thomas Richardson, prominent surgeon, fatal fall during their honeymoon. Santa Barbara, 2018, William Cooper, real estate developer, tragic accident on their yacht. Each time Patricia disappeared with millions. Each time she resurfaced months later with a new identity, new credentials, new hunting grounds. But Robert had done something none of her previous husbands had. He'd kept records. Meticulous, detailed records. The envelopes he'd mailed to Jenny contained copies of everything. Bank statements showing systematic draining of accounts, forged documents, and most damning of all, Patricia's real identity. Margaret Palmer, wanted for questioning in 3 states under different names. The technical evidence proved decisive. Miami PD's cyber unit discovered that the security camera footage had been tampered with. A sophisticated loop played during the crucial moments of Robert's fall. Patricia's perfect alibi dissolved when forensics proved the balcony footage from 5:47 a.m. was actually from the previous morning. The truth of Suite 2010's final hours emerged through scattered evidence. Robert had confronted Patricia with his discoveries around 2 a.m. The argument heard by neighbors wasn't about phone calls. It was about the millions missing from his accounts. The scattered papers weren't from sleepwalking. They were evidence Robert had gathered over months. Patricia's carefully constructed world unraveled with stunning speed. The fingerprints on the balcony railing. The traces of sedatives in Robert's last cup of coffee. The bruises on his wrists matching the unique pattern of Patricia's signature Hermes scarf. Each piece of evidence revealed premeditation so meticulous it chilled even veteran investigators. January 20, 2023, Patricia's arrest at Miami International Airport made headlines. She wasn't fleeing to the Cayman Islands. Her real destination was Dubai, a country with no extradition treaty. In her carry-on, investigators found 6 passports under different names and USB drives containing details of potential future targets, wealthy widowers carefully selected and researched. The trial captivated Miami for months. Jenny Anderson testified about her father's growing suspicions, his careful investigation, his final warning phone call. Detective Ramirez presented the technical evidence that broke the case, the tampered footage, the financial trails, the forensic proof that Robert's fall was no accident. But it was Robert's video that sealed Patricia's fate. His methodical documentation of her deception, recorded in secret during their brief marriage, revealed a predator who had perfected her technique over decades. The jury took only 4 hours to reach their verdict. On September 15, 2023, Patricia Mitchell Anderson, known now by her true name, Margaret Palmer, was sentenced to life without parole. The case opened investigations across the country, revealing a trail of suspicious deaths dating back 20 years. The St. Regis Bal Harbour's Suite 20 and 10 remained empty for months after Robert's death. Even after renovation, guests sometimes report strange sounds in the early morning hours, like furniture being moved, they say, or like someone pacing on the balcony at precisely 5:43 a.m. Jenny Anderson established the Robert Anderson Foundation, helping families investigate suspicious deaths of loved ones. Detective Ramirez now lectures at the FBI Academy, teaching new agents about the case that changed how law enforcement views predatory marriages. And somewhere in safety deposit boxes across Boston, Robert's final letters wait to be discovered, insurance against the day he knew might come. His last gift to Jenny wasn't just evidence of a crime. It was a warning to others about wolves in luxury clothing, about predators who hunt with prenuptial agreements instead of weapons. In the end, Suite 2010's story wasn't just about murder. It was about the paper trail that brought down a black widow, about a father's love that reached beyond death, and about justice that arrived with the morning tide on Miami's pristine beaches. The question was never who killed Robert Anderson. The question was always how many others there were. Thanks to Robert's meticulous nature and a daughter who never stopped asking questions, those answers are finally coming to light, one cold case at a time.